History, as they say, is written by the victors. Those who emerge victorious often shape the narrative, casting their enemies as villains, their own deeds as righteous. But is this the whole truth? Imagine two armies clashing on a battlefield. One emerges victorious, returning home to celebrations and chroniclers eager to immortalize their triumph. The other fades into obscurity, their stories told only through the words of their enemies. But what about the voices of the defeated? Their perspective often disappears, leaving us with a lopsided account. Villains are born not just from actions but from narratives crafted by their adversaries. Human beings are rarely one-dimensional. They are shaped by their circumstances, their beliefs, and the choices they make under pressure. Even the darkest figures in history may have had moments of light. From Julius Caesar calling his enemies barbarians, to medieval rulers demonizing political rivals, history's villains are often the victims of carefully constructed propaganda. Evil is not a universal concept. What one culture sees as heroic, another may deem monstrous. Morality shifts with time and geography, shaped by religion, politics, and cultural norms. Take Joan of Arc, once condemned as a heretic and later canonized as a saint. Or Galileo, whose pursuit of truth labeled him a rebel against divine law. Perceptions of morality evolve, often flipping narratives over centuries. Good and evil are not just moral concepts, they are tools. Rulers have long used them to unite people under a cause or suppress opposition. To call someone a monster is not just an accusation, it's a declaration of war. Even history's celebrated heroes have their dark sides. Alexander the Great united vast territories but left a trail of destruction. Can one man be both a visionary and a tyrant? Conversely, even the most notorious villains may have virtues. Vlad the Impaler defended his homeland with unparalleled resolve, while Elizabeth Bathory's early life saw acts of charity and loyalty. Most people are neither wholly good nor entirely evil. They exist in the gray areas, driven by circumstances, personal ambitions, and moral dilemmas. In ancient times, villainy was often attributed to defying the gods or challenging societal norms. Pharaoh Akhenaten, who revolutionized Egyptian religion, was branded a heretic after his death. The medieval period saw villainy tied to heresy, rebellion, and witchcraft. The church held immense power, labeling anyone who opposed it as a servant of evil. In the modern era, villains became tied to ideology, from industrial magnates exploiting workers to revolutionary leaders overthrowing monarchies. The lines between good and evil blurred further, from Iago in Othello to Milton's Satan in Paradise Lost. Literature has long explored the villain's perspective. These stories force us to confront the motives behind their actions. Modern media has amplified the allure of villains, portraying them as complex anti-heroes. Why do we empathize with them? Perhaps because they reflect parts of ourselves we're reluctant to acknowledge. As society changes, so do our depictions of villains. The same figure demonized in one century may be celebrated in the next. Understanding the motivations and flaws of history's villains helps us avoid repeating their mistakes. Their stories are warnings, but also lessons in resilience, ambition, and the human condition. Simplistic narratives may comfort us, but they fail to capture the complexity of human life. History deserves more than caricatures. It demands critical thinking. At the Wisdom Tooth, our mission is to uncover these complexities, presenting a balanced view that challenges traditional narratives. By the end of this video, you may see history's villains in a new light. From Genghis Khan to Elizabeth Bathory, we'll explore the lives, deeds, and legacies of those labeled as monsters. But were they really villains, or simply human beings shaped by extraordinary circumstances? In 1162, a boy named Temujin was born into a world of turmoil. The Mongolian steppes were a battleground of warring tribes, where survival often depended on strength and cunning. Temujin's father, a tribal leader, was poisoned when Temujin was just 9. His family was cast out, forced to fend for themselves in the harsh wilderness. This early betrayal left a mark, teaching him that loyalty was rare and survival was paramount. Despite his hardships, Temujin began to unite the fractured tribes, proving himself a charismatic leader and a shrewd tactician. By his early 20s, he had begun building a coalition that would change the course of history. Temujin, now Genghis Khan, led his armies with unmatched strategy, using innovative tactics like feigned retreats and psychological warfare. He conquered vast territories across Asia and into Europe. His campaigns were devastating. Entire cities were razed, and estimates of those killed range from 10 to 40 million. For many, Genghis Khan epitomized the brutality of war, yet, this terror was deliberate. By spreading fear, Genghis Khan often secured victory without a fight, preserving resources and minimizing his own casualties. Beyond the battlefield, Genghis Khan was a statesman. He established the Yasa, a legal code that emphasized meritocracy and loyalty. Under his rule, the Silk Road flourished, connecting East and West like never before. Remarkably, Genghis Khan promoted religious tolerance. He allowed his subjects to practice their faiths freely, understanding that unity required respect for diversity. His empire invested in infrastructure, building roads and establishing a postal system. These innovations not only strengthened his control but also laid the groundwork for cultural and economic exchange. In Mongolia, Genghis Khan is revered as a national hero, a unifier who brought order to chaos. But in much of the world, he remains a symbol of unbridled violence. Whether viewed as a monster or a genius, Genghis Khan's life offers lessons in leadership, adaptability, and the consequences of power. His story is a reminder that history's villains are rarely simple. The story of Genghis Khan we know today is largely shaped by the records of his enemies. European chroniclers, who faced the Mongol onslaught, described him as a bloodthirsty barbarian. But could these accounts have been exaggerated, or even deliberately manipulated? Genghis Khan's rivals, including the Song dynasty in China and Persian rulers, had a vested interest in portraying him as a villain. By painting him as a destroyer of civilizations, they sought to justify their resistance and rally their people. In Mongolia, the narrative is entirely different. Here, he is celebrated as a unifier who brought law, order, and prosperity. This stark contrast raises an important question. Was Genghis Khan truly the monster his enemies claimed, or was he a product of his time, vilified by those who opposed him? Some historians argue that Genghis Khan may have cultivated his fearsome reputation intentionally. By allowing tales of his ruthlessness to spread, he intimidated enemies into surrendering, often avoiding bloodshed altogether. If so, was his villainous image a calculated weapon rather than an accurate reflection of his character? Genghis Khan's story forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Villainy is often in the eye of the beholder. To the farmers of Persia, he was a destroyer. To the traders of the Silk Road, he was a protector. Could it be that the true Genghis Khan lies somewhere in between these extremes? Who was the real Genghis Khan? Was he a ruthless conqueror, a visionary leader, or a misunderstood figure demonized by history? The answer may never be clear, but it is this mystery that continues to captivate historians and storytellers alike. While Genghis Khan's legacy remains shrouded in the fog of history, our next figure embraced his terrifying reputation with pride. But was Vlad the Impaler a monster, or a misunderstood patriot? Let's find out. The 15th century was a turbulent time for Eastern Europe. The small principality of Wallachia found itself caught between the rising Ottoman Empire and the powerful Kingdom of Hungary. It was into this world of shifting alliances and constant danger that Vlad Dracula was born. Vlad was the son of Vlad II Dracul, a Wallachian ruler who pledged allegiance to the Ottoman Sultan. As part of this pact, young Vlad and his brother Radu were sent to the Ottoman court as hostages. While Radu embraced Ottoman culture, Vlad grew resentful, viewing his captors as enemies. When Vlad returned to Wallachia, he found his family betrayed. His father had been assassinated by Wallachian nobles, and his older brother had been tortured and buried alive. Consumed by rage, Vlad vowed to avenge his family and reclaim his throne. Vlad seized the throne of Wallachia in 1456, determined to consolidate his power and secure his homeland from both internal and external threats. To eliminate opposition, Vlad used fear as his weapon. His preferred method of execution was impalement, a horrifying practice that earned him the nickname Vlad the Impaler. His brutal reign struck terror into the hearts of his enemies and allies alike. Despite his ruthlessness, Vlad was a fierce defender of Wallachia. He used innovative tactics to repel the Ottomans, including scorched earth strategies and psychological warfare. His actions, though brutal, were aimed at preserving his people's independence. In one of his most infamous acts, Vlad impaled 20,000 Ottoman prisoners on the battlefield, creating a forest of corpses that horrified Sultan Mehmed II's advancing army. While this act delayed the invasion, it cemented Vlad's reputation as a monster in the eyes of his enemies. However, among the Wallachian peasantry, Vlad was seen as a protector. He enforced strict laws to reduce crime, ensuring that even a gold coin left in the open would remain untouched. His reign brought a level of stability that was rare in those chaotic times. Much of Vlad's horrific reputation comes from propaganda spread by his enemies, particularly the Saxons of Transylvania, with whom he had a bitter feud. These stories, embellished over time, painted him as a sadistic monster. The Saxons, who suffered under Vlad's harsh trade policies, were among the first to spread tales of his barbarity. These accounts, often exaggerated, were later picked up by other European nations seeking to vilify him. To his supporters, Vlad was a staunch defender of Christianity against the encroaching Ottomans. He corresponded with Pope Pius II, presenting himself as a warrior for Christendom. Was he a hero in disguise, misunderstood by those who sought to undermine him? In a time where rulers often used brutal methods to maintain power, Vlad's actions were not entirely unique. His reign, though bloody, was consistent with the harsh realities of medieval politics. Vlad's fearsome reputation inspired Bram Stoker's iconic vampire, Dracula. Over time, the historical figure became intertwined with the fictional monster, further obscuring the truth. In modern Romania, Vlad is celebrated as a national hero who fought to defend his homeland. His story is a source of pride, a reminder of Wallachia's resilience against powerful adversaries. Was Vlad the Impaler a sadistic tyrant, or a misunderstood patriot who used fear to protect his people? The answer depends on which version of history you choose to believe. From Wallachia, we now turn to Hungary, where a noblewoman's alleged crimes have made her one of history's most infamous figures. But was Elizabeth Bathory truly the Blood Countess, or the victim of a sinister plot? Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 into one of Hungary's most powerful noble families. The Bathorys held immense influence, with ties to kings, bishops, and military leaders. Elizabeth was raised in privilege, but her world was one of strict hierarchies and harsh realities. Elizabeth received an exceptional education for her time, speaking multiple languages and mastering the intricacies of court politics. Yet, her early years were marked by whispers of cruelty, with rumors of her witnessing brutal punishments meted out by her family's retainers. At 15, Elizabeth married Ferenc Nadasdy, a soldier known as the Black Knight of Hungary. The marriage consolidated their family's power, and Elizabeth managed their vast estates during her husband's frequent absences at war. Elizabeth's legacy is dominated by the gruesome accusations that earned her the nickname the Blood Countess. Stories claim she tortured and killed hundreds of young women, bathing in their blood to preserve her youth. In 1610, Elizabeth was arrested after an investigation led by Count Georgi Thurzo. Witnesses testified to seeing torture devices and corpses in her castle. But these testimonies often came from servants who were tortured themselves into confessing. The alleged number of Elizabeth's victims varies wildly, with some accounts claiming as many as 650 deaths, but no concrete evidence such as burial sites or reliable records supports these figures. Could these numbers have been fabricated? Elizabeth's immense wealth and independence made her a target. Her vast estates were coveted by rival nobles, and her arrest conveniently transferred her lands to the crown. Could the trial have been a carefully orchestrated plot to remove a powerful woman? As a strong, wealthy and educated woman, Elizabeth defied societal norms. In a time when powerful women were often viewed with suspicion, it's possible that her reputation was smeared as part of a broader pattern of misogyny. Sensational stories of Elizabeth's cruelty spread quickly, fueled by a burgeoning print industry. These tales, filled with lurid details, were more effective in tarnishing her reputation than any legal evidence. Elizabeth Bathory's story became legend, inspiring countless tales of vampires and monsters. But this legacy raises questions. Was she truly guilty, or has she been unjustly vilified by history? Historians remain divided. Some argue that the testimonies and her imprisonment point to guilt, while others suggest that the lack of concrete evidence and political motives behind her trial cast doubt on her alleged crimes. Elizabeth Bathory's life was undeniably complex. She was a skilled administrator, a patron of the arts, and a defender of her family's legacy, yet, the darkness surrounding her name endures whether rooted in truth or fiction. What if Elizabeth Bathory was more a victim of her time than a perpetrator of unspeakable crimes? Could her reputation as a monster have been shaped by those who stood to gain from her downfall? Men who ruled with cruelty, like Vlad the Impaler, are often remembered as protectors or warriors. Why is it that Elizabeth's alleged crimes have overshadowed her accomplishments? Could her gender have amplified the vilification? With centuries of myths and embellishments, the truth about Elizabeth Bathory may never be known. What remains is a figure whose story forces us to question the narratives we inherit. From the dark legend of the Blood Countess, we now move to the fierce conquests of Attila the Hun. Was this feared warrior truly a scourge, or was he a misunderstood unifier? Let's explore. The 5th century was a time of upheaval. The Western Roman Empire was in decline, beset by internal corruption and external threats. Among those threats was the Hun Empire, led by a man whose name became synonymous with terror, Attila. Born into the nomadic Hunnic culture, Attila was trained from a young age in the art of war. His upbringing on the steppes instilled in him a fierce independence and a mastery of mobility, key traits that would define his campaigns. Attila initially ruled alongside his brother Bleda, but after Bleda's sudden death, Attila took sole control of the Hunnic Empire. Rumors swirled that Attila had orchestrated his brother's demise, though historical evidence remains inconclusive. Attila's campaigns across Europe earned him the nickname the Scourge of God. His swift and brutal invasions left cities in ruins and populations in terror, yet his attacks were often strategic, targeting weak points in the Roman defenses. Attila's armies laid waste to many Roman cities, leaving a trail of devastation. Yet his tactics were not mindless. They were calculated moves to extract tribute and weaken his adversaries. Despite his reputation for violence, Attila was also a skilled diplomat. He forced the Romans to pay massive tributes in gold to avoid further attacks, leveraging fear as a tool of negotiation. Under Attila's leadership, the Huns became a powerful confederation of diverse tribes. He united disparate groups through alliances and military strength, creating an empire that stretched from the Rhine to the Danube. Attila was known for his strict sense of justice. He demanded loyalty from his allies and soldiers, ensuring that disputes were resolved quickly and order was maintained within his empire. Interestingly, Attila allowed religious freedom within his realm. Despite his clashes with Christian Rome, he did not force his beliefs on the people he governed, fostering a relatively harmonious coexistence. Much of what we know about Attila comes from Roman sources, which describe him as a savage, bloodthirsty barbarian, but these accounts were written by his enemies. How accurate are they? Like Genghis Khan, Attila understood the power of reputation. By cultivating fear, he often achieved his goals without needing to engage in prolonged battles. For the struggling Roman Empire, Attila became a convenient scapegoat. Blaming their decline on an external monster allowed them to deflect attention from their own failures and corruption. Attila's life ended abruptly in 453 AD, on the night of his wedding to a young bride named Ildiko. Accounts suggest he died of a nosebleed, though some speculate foul play. Was this the end of a great leader, or the beginning of a legend. Without Attila's leadership, the Hunnic Empire quickly disintegrated. His ability to hold the confederation together underscores his unique leadership skills. Attila's legacy remains divided. In the West, he is remembered as a ruthless invader, but in Hungary and other parts of Central Europe, he is celebrated as a national hero, a defender against Roman oppression. Could Attila's actions be viewed as those of a pragmatic leader rather than a bloodthirsty tyrant? His conquests were brutal, but they were also strategic, aimed at securing the survival of his people. The Romans, desperate to justify their declining power, had every reason to paint Attila as the ultimate villain. By demonizing him, they masked their own weaknesses and failures. Attila's story reminds us that history is often written with an agenda. His leadership, resilience, and ability to adapt to challenges offer valuable lessons, even if his methods were controversial. From the steps of the Huns to the grandeur of Rome, our next figure is one of history's most infamous emperors. Was Nero truly a mad tyrant who burned his city, or has his story been twisted by history? Nero Claudius Caesar was born in 37 AD into the Julio-Claudian dynasty, one of the most powerful yet volatile ruling families in history. Intrigue and betrayal were woven into the fabric of his childhood. Nero's ascent to power was orchestrated by his mother, Agrippina the Younger, who ensured her son's adoption by Emperor Claudius. When Claudius died, allegedly poisoned by Agrippina, Nero became the youngest emperor in Roman history at just 16 years old. At first, Nero's reign showed promise. Guided by his tutor Seneca and military advisor Burrus, he enacted policies to reduce taxes, improve public welfare, and promote the arts. For a time, Rome thrived under the young emperor's rule. As Nero grew older, tensions with his mother escalated. Agrippina sought to control him, but Nero resented her dominance. In 59 AD, he orchestrated her assassination, severing one of his strongest ties to power and stability. Nero's later reign was marked by excess and self-indulgence. He fancied himself an artist, often performing in public, an act considered scandalous for a Roman emperor. His obsession with the arts and disregard for governance alienated Rome's elite. In 64 AD, a catastrophic fire destroyed much of Rome. Rumors spread that Nero had started the fire to clear space for his grand palace, the Domus Aurea. Though there is no solid evidence to support this claim, the fire became a turning point in his reign. Nero blamed the fire on Rome's small Christian community, initiating a brutal wave of persecution. Christians were tortured, crucified, and burned alive, cementing Nero's image as a tyrant. Much of what we know about Nero comes from historians like Tacitus and Suetonius, who wrote decades after his death. Their accounts, influenced by Rome's political climate, paint Nero as a villain, but how much of it was propaganda? Despite his excesses, Nero retained a degree of popularity among Rome's lower classes. He organized elaborate games and distributed grain to the populace, earning their loyalty even as the Senate turned against him. By 68 AD, Nero faced mounting opposition. Revolts erupted across the empire, and key military leaders declared their allegiance to rival claimants for the throne. Abandoned by the Senate and declared a public enemy, Nero fled Rome. His final moments were spent in a villa outside the city, where he took his own life, reportedly uttering the words, "What an artist dies in me." Nero's passion for the arts set him apart from other emperors. While his theatrical pursuits scandalized Rome's elite, they also highlighted his desire to leave a cultural legacy. Could his eccentricity have been misinterpreted as madness? In the context of Roman history, Nero's actions were not entirely unique. The Julio-Claudian dynasty was notorious for its internal power struggles, and many emperors used fear to maintain control. The accounts of Nero's reign are colored by the biases of his enemies. The Senate, who resented his disregard for their authority, had every reason to demonize him after his death. Nero's attempt to redefine what it meant to be an emperor, more artist than warrior, clashed with Rome's traditional values. Was he truly a tyrant, or simply a man ahead of his time? Today, Nero remains one of history's most controversial figures. To some, he is a symbol of decadence and cruelty. To others, he is a misunderstood leader whose vision was overshadowed by scandal. Nero's story is a cautionary tale of the dangers of isolation and excess, but it also serves as a reminder that history is rarely black and white. Perhaps, in Nero, we see not a monster, but a deeply flawed human being. From the steppes of Mongolia to the theaters of Rome, we've explored the lives of history's so-called villains. But what do their stories teach us about the way we understand the past? Let's reflect. History is often told from the perspective of those who prevailed. This creates a narrative that glorifies the victors while vilifying their enemies. The complexity of human experience is reduced to black and white, leaving little room for nuance. Throughout history, propaganda has been a powerful tool to shape public opinion. Figures like Rasputin and Elizabeth Bathory were vilified through exaggerated stories and biased accounts, often for political or personal gain. It's our responsibility to question the sources of these narratives. By seeking out multiple perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding of the individuals and the times they lived in. People's opinions are shaped by their experiences, biases, and agendas. Judging a historical figure, or anyone, based solely on others' perspectives risks misunderstanding their true character. Most individuals exist in the gray areas of morality. Genghis Khan was a conqueror and an innovator. Cortés was both a visionary and a destroyer. To see only one side is to miss the full picture. Understanding history requires empathy, an ability to step into the shoes of those who lived it. Only then can we see the motivations, fears, and aspirations that drove their actions. Actions deemed villainous today may have been seen as necessary or even honorable in the past. Context is crucial to understanding historical behavior and avoiding anachronistic judgments. Labels like villain and hero simplify complex individuals. By questioning these labels, we open ourselves to a more nuanced understanding of history and human nature. History holds a mirror to the present. By studying the lives of those who shaped it, both positively and negatively, we can learn how to navigate the challenges of our own time. In our own lives, we often form opinions based on incomplete or biased information, whether in personal relationships or public discourse. History reminds us to seek out multiple perspectives before passing judgment. Just as historians challenge traditional narratives, we too must question the stories we are told. The truth is rarely simple, and understanding it requires effort and critical thinking. Human beings are inherently complex. By embracing this complexity, we foster empathy, open-mindedness, and a deeper connection to the shared story of humanity. The lives of history's so-called villains teach us to question, to empathize, and to seek the truth. But what does this mean for the way we understand history itself? Let's conclude. History is often presented as a battle between good and evil, heroes and villains. But as we have seen, the truth is rarely that simple. The people who shaped history were human, flawed, ambitious, and shaped by the world around them. Perspective plays a critical role in how we view the past. A hero to one culture may be a villain to another. Understanding these differences helps us see the multifaceted nature of history. Re-examining history's villains is not about absolving them of wrongdoing. It's about understanding their actions in context, questioning biased narratives, and learning from their successes and failures. The stories we're told are shaped by those who tell them. By asking questions, who wrote this, why, we uncover deeper truths and challenge oversimplified narratives. Empathy doesn't mean excusing wrongdoings. It means recognizing the humanity in all people, understanding their motivations, and learning from their decisions, both good and bad. The way we understand history mirrors the way we approach the present. By embracing complexity and questioning simplistic labels, we become better equipped to navigate our world today. History is not just a record of what happened, it's a mirror reflecting who we are. By understanding its complexities, we better understand ourselves and the challenges we face today. At the Wisdom Tooth, our mission is to encourage critical thinking, empathy, and curiosity about the past. Thank you for joining us on this journey to uncover the truth behind history's so-called villains. What do you think? Were these figures truly villains, or were they products of their time? Share your thoughts in the comments. We would love to hear your perspective.